Well, good day and welcome to Model Railroad Academy. I'm Ron Marsh, one of the contributors here at Model Railroad Academy and your host for today. And today we are going to be talking about a variety of different media and products that you can use for weathering your locomotives, rolling stock, structures, and other items on your model railroad layout. Weathering, for me personally, is one of my favorite activities to do in model railroading because I love the way it brings a model to life. A model that you get maybe ready to run out of a package that's ready to supposedly, theoretically plop on the layout. Usually tends to look a little bright, a little shiny, a little new, a little plasticky, a little toy-like. Can I go on and on here? Whenever it comes right out of the package. Even structure kits that we buy or other types of kits that we might assemble ourselves have a tendency to have kind of that new look to them, or that toy model kind of a look. Of course, we are always, as model railroaders, looking for ways to create greater realism of our models and our layouts to make them look more like the real thing in real life. Well, I think one of the best ways to do that is through weathering. Now, I know there are a lot of people, my wife is one of them, who doesn't understand why you take something that looks brand new and pristine and shiny and then make it look all dirty and rusty and old. But if you look at railroads, that's how railroads look. Locomotives and rolling stock are rarely ever really clean, and often they are not only a little grimy, but they are very grimy and greasy, rust-streaked, weather-beaten, etc., etc. Even structures in the real world have a tendency to, over time, get that dirty, streaked, grimy, weathered look. And so if we want to create greater realism, bring people into something that feels like the real world on our layouts, one of the things that does that best of all is weathering. Now, when we talk about weathering, there are lots of different kinds of weathering effects. There is, of course, just the natural fading of paint and items as they sit out in the sun and in the weather. There are the streaks of dirt and grime that happen as dirt and dust settle on an item and then rain washes it down the sides of that structure or piece of rolling stock. There is, of course, rust that happens on metal items. Wood tends to have paint that will peel, and then it will weather and fade to gray and black underneath that paint as it comes through that paint. Or wood that is bare to the elements will tend to fade to gray and various colors. We could go on and on talking about various weathering effects. What I want to show you today is several products that can help us create many of those different effects in different ways. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to do those. Our time here doesn't really allow me to demonstrate all of that, but I'm going to try to describe to you how to do that. I'm going to show you some examples right off of my own layout of how I've used many of these products and these techniques for myself. So with all that said, we're going to turn the camera down to the workbench here and show you some of these products and some ways that we can use them to create various weathering effects. The first weathering products that I want to show you and talk to you about are some dry kinds of products, or what's known as various weathering powders. And I'm going to show you several, and they're good for different things, and I'll show you some of the different things that they're good for. The first one I'm going to show you, one of the first things that I ever used in weathering when I was first learning how to do weathering was simple artist's pastels. Now, you can pick these up in any art supply store or general craft store like Hobby Lobby, Michael's, etc. And this is literally a box of what look like square chalks. And of course, these pastels are used by artists to do a variety of different kind of artwork. But they also work well for weathering, at least in some situations. Now, you can look at my set here and tell that what I've used the most has been this very red rusty color, these brown rusty colors, a little bit of the black, and then also these kind of yellow colors down here, which also make good grime and rust kind of colors. These are simple to use. We can just take them and scrape off a little bit of the chalk, and that's literally what they are. They are artist's chalks. I don't know if I can kind of mark on that, just to kind of give you a sense, get more of a color. There, you can see the red on the edge of the box. Just basically a chalk kind of a substance, and we can scrape some of these chalks off with the edge of a hobby knife, or what I usually do is just sand a little bit off on a piece of somewhat coarse sandpaper, and then use a brush to apply that. Now, one thing I want to say about these particular types of weathering materials is that these are best used on media like paper or cardboard, things that are porous. I have used these on plastic models before, and it can be done, but what you find is that because it's just a simple chalk, it will tend to want to rub off with your fingers. Therefore, you're going to have to seal it with something. So you can put these on and seal them with some dull coat, but as you seal them with a dull coat, they have a tendency to kind of fade on the model. So what you end up doing is applying pastel, sealing with dull coat, applying more pastel, sealing that with dull coat. I often find that it takes several different applications in order to get these to work on plastic models. So maybe not ideal for plastic models, but when it comes to something that's made from paper, something that's made from wood, something that is porous, these will work very, very well. Now, there is a similar product, a chalk pastel kind of product that has been produced specifically for model builders, and that is a product known as pan pastels. And I have some pan pastels right here. I'll pull the lid off here so it's not quite so shiny. And here, again, you see these are colors that are ideal for weathering the models that we weather, like on model railroads, because they are outdoorsy, rusty, dirty kinds of colors. And these we can use in much the same way as the artist pastels. But again, these, they don't stick well to plastic, so you have to seal them. Thus, they're not ideal for plastic kinds of applications, but really, really good for paper or for wood. Now, these are very soft. You can see I literally can just rub it right off of there with my finger. I don't have to do any scraping like I did with the artist pastels. And we can apply these with a paintbrush, or we can also use like a makeup sponge like this. And I find that many of the techniques I'm going to talk to you about today, makeup sponges are great ways to apply these various kinds of weathering processes. So that is the pastels kind of version of weathering. Now let's talk about some other dry types of weathering that we can use better on plastic models. And what I'm referring to there are weathering powders that are made out of paint pigments. Now I have one type here. These are Monroe Models weathering powders. You've probably heard of AIM weathering powders. They are the same thing. AIM was bought out a few years ago by Monroe Models, and so they just changed the name, the same product. You can also get similar products to these from Bragdon Enterprises. I believe Tamiya makes these kinds of weathering powders. And there's a difference between these and the pastels we were just talking about. First of all, in these, what you're going to find is inside you have a loose, chalky kind of substance. But the difference is that this is not actually a chalk, but rather this is a paint pigment. And paint is designed specifically to adhere to various kinds of surfaces. And so these pigments will actually adhere to plastic or other shinier, less porous types of surfaces. We can take these, apply these with a small brush, again, and scrub them in just a little bit. And as we do, they will actually stick. We don't have as great a need to seal these as we do the chalk types of powders. And they do a great job of weathering. I'm just going to show you one item here. I've used these on a lot of things, but I'm going to specifically just show you this locomotive. This is one of the first locomotives I ever had in N-scale, and one of the first things I ever weathered. And literally all I did to this was use some black weathering powders. I got some streaks on the sides of the locomotive. You can see I got some diesel exhaust streaks along the top, and just dirtied this locomotive up a little bit and made it look like a locomotive that's been in service for a while. And again, all I did was apply some weathering powders to this locomotive. So weathering powders are one great way to weather various items. Another item that's really handy that works very, very well, and that is washes. Now, there are all kinds of different washes on the market, and I'm going to show you a couple different things today. Again, this is Monroe Models, a product of theirs again, and these are some weathering washes that they produce that have a pigment that I suspect is very similar to the weathering powders that I just showed you, but it's in an alcohol base, and you shake these up, and they're a very thin wash, and these do a really good job of just creating thin layers and hints of rust, grime, dirt, whatever it is that we're trying to create. Now, these come in a variety of colors, just like the weathering powders I just showed you. I only showed you 2 colors, but they come in a variety of colors, as do these washes. And these can help us to build up again, the black of something that is just dirty and moldy. Or I've got earth colors, rust colors that kind of show us general rust, that sort of thing. And these washes are really good. I use these a lot on flat surfaces. And on loads, I've created scrap metal loads and weathered them with these gray and rusty looking washes. They look really, really good. I've also got here a little flat car that I'm going to show you. And this flat car it had a plastic floor in it, and it was painted green. It had a wood grain. It's supposed to be a wood floor. But I needed to do something to make it look a lot more realistic. So literally, I weathered the floor of this model with those very same washes. Just used bits in different places and scrubbed them in and let them sit. Used a variety of layers here to get a variety of color to show a wood floor that has got a little bit of deterioration to it. That's been used, it's been scraped, stuff has been left on it to soak and fade it, and all kinds of different things. So that's one kind of a wash. There are other washes that, as model railroaders, we get from places like the military modelers and wargaming community that do some incredible modeling. And there's some products by a couple of companies. One's called MiG Ammo, and the other is called AK Interactive. And they make some great washes for the sake of all kinds of weathering effects. But one of my favorites is their streaking wash. And this is a streaking wash here. It's a kind of a rusty color. This is a dark brown, dark rusty color. And this is literally made for creating rust streaks on the side of something that might be rusty, and the weather and rains washing those streaks down the sides. Now this is an enamel kind of a product, and so we need to use a thinner for this whenever we're cleaning our brushes or whenever we're diluting it. And I've got one model here that I've used some of those streaking effects are. This covered hopper here, you can see the grimy streaks down the side. These were created with that streaking effect kind of a wash. Another one of my favorite media for weathering, and that is artist oils. Now I use artist oils for a couple of different purposes, and I'll show you both of those in a moment. Here I have a raw sienna and a burnt umber. These aren't the only colors I use, but these are my 2 favorite by far because they give you a nice rusty kind of a look. And I love to use these on rolling stock and locomotives whenever I am creating rust effects. Now we can dilute these artist oils and with like terpenoid or another kind of appropriate thinner and use these to create streaking effects as well. My favorite thing to do with artist oils is to use something like a toothpick or a bit of wire and place a bit of the artist oil on the side of, say, a piece of rolling stock and let it sit there and dry for a day or so, because these dry very slowly. And then come back with a brush with just a little bit of thinner and drag down. And what you do is you create a rust patch, and you get the texture of a rust patch in the spot that you made with the artist oil. And then dragging it down, you can create the rust streaks that would flow down from that. I'm going to show you one piece of rolling stock here. Now I'm going to show you this. This is the clean side. I haven't weathered this side at all. But then I want you to see the other side. What I've done here, and this was all done with artist's oils. And again, you see the rust patches there, the streaks that run down from the rust patches, as well as other rusty, dirty streaks on the car. Again, all of this was done with the artist oils. Another model I'll show you here, also done primarily with artist oils, and that is this locomotive that I did somewhat recently. And this is a locomotive that has been burned out, that's had a fire, and you can see the charred section back here near in the area where the fire would have been internally, and it created that burned out look, as well as various rust streaks. We'll turn around the other side. You can see some rust streaks here along the sill, some rusty spots along the roof lines. All of those things that I'm describing were done on this model with artist's oils. And then there were some other effects that were used on that model as well. So artist oils work really, really well. Before I get completely away from the idea of washes, sometimes we work not just with plastic, but with wood. And with wood structures, there are a few things that I like to use to weather them. The most basic and simple is simply to use a solution of India ink. Now, literally what this is, I buy India ink at an art store. I mix 1 teaspoon of India ink with a pint of 70% isopropyl alcohol. It makes a nice wash that will it'll age and slightly darken a model, but it also settles in the nooks and crannies and crevices and gives some relief and brings out the detail on a model. It works really well. I love to use this on rock models, but I also use it on plastic models many times as well to help bring out that detail. Another way I use this is if I'm building a wood structure where I want to create a peeling paint effect. I want weathered wood underneath that, and you can use India ink for that as well. Just take your bare wood, dip it in the India ink, let it sit and dry. Sometimes I'll use 2 applications to really make it look weathered, and then create my peeling paint effect over the top. That works really well. For the peeling paint effect, I didn't really bring anything here with me to show you, but after I've stained the wood to make it look weathered, then right before I paint the wood, I'll apply some mineral spirits to the wood, and then while the mineral spirits is wet, I'll apply a paint. I use a thicker paint for this, something like a craft paint, and I'll let that just partially dry, just barely dry to the touch, and then take a piece of tape and apply it to that paint and peel it off. And what it'll do is it will peel off little bits of that paint where the mineral spirits has kept it from adhering yet to the wood. You get a nice peeling paint effect, and you can reveal the weathered wood underneath. Another way to weather wood, and especially if you have a wood item or a wood structure that is out in the open, that's completely open to the weather, not painted, and that is these weathering mixes from Hunterline. And again, they have these in a variety of colors, from stained wood that maybe is intentionally stained, that's supposed to look nice and a nice wood color, to like this light gray and also darker gray and blackish colors that give you that weathered kind of wood look. And these work really, really well as well. Stains or specifically for wood. Okay, my last method and media for weathering maybe is what I should have shown first, and something that I really enjoy, and that is using an airbrush and acrylic paints for weathering. And I use this for a variety of effects, but most often what I do is I'll use an airbrush to apply a fade coat to a piece of rolling stock or a locomotive to give the paint a faded look. And sometimes on rolling stock or locomotives, that's all you need to do. You know, the locomotive or a piece of rolling stock that's been on the rails for just a year or 2 years, it may not be all rusty. It may not be really, really filthy. It may just be a little bit faded from being out in the sun and the weather for that time. And so creating a little bit of a fade effect is a great way to do that. For fade coats, I usually use white or sometimes gray, depending on the color of the model. And I mix a very thin wash, usually about 1 part paint to 10 parts thinner, whatever the appropriate thinner for that paint is. A real thin coat, and you want to build a fade coat up very, very slowly because you don't want to overdo it. You can really ruin a model. And also, when I'm applying a fade coat, this is my oldest airbrush, and this is a single action airbrush, which works really well for fading because I can set the amount of paint that I want to put on, and I don't ever have to worry about that changing whenever I push the trigger. Trigger only starts and stops the paint. It doesn't affect the paint mix. So I can experiment on a piece of paper or something, get the amount of paint flowing that I want, and then that won't change as long as I use this. And so I get a really consistent spray as I go through the entire model. So I like to use my single action airbrush for a fade coat. Now here's an example of a fade coat. First I'm going to show you a car that's been untouched. This is a covered hopper, and you see the paint looks like you would expect it to come right straight out of the shop, or in this case out of the box when you buy the model. Now here is another piece of rolling stock that was that same color that has been faded. And you can see the difference there between the unfaded and the faded model. And the only thing that's been done to these, apart from some weathering on the trucks, is I applied a fade coat of thinned white wash to the sides of this model, and really made it look like a model that's been on the rails for a while. Another effect that we can get with an airbrush, if you run coal trains on your layout at all, dirtying up coal cars, the airbrush works really well for that. Here's one where I've basically just sprayed some flat black on the inside of this car to simulate coal dust that would be left behind. And then also, I hope you can see it in the camera there, made some black streaks down the side that would also come about from coal dust washing down the sides of this model, and it just dirtied this up a little bit, consistent with a car that has been carrying coal and has been out in the weather for some time. And then one more that I want to show you with the airbrush, and again I'll show you an unweathered model. Here's a tank car that is unweathered. I haven't touched this. It's shiny black, like it would come from the factory. And then here is one that I've weathered somewhat heavily with an airbrush. And what I did here was applied a fade coat. First of all, because these models these cars tend to fade to a dull black or gray, ultimately, just from the sun. They also tend to fade more on the top than on the bottom. The sun hits the top, doesn't hit the bottom areas as well. So I tried to create that here, a lot more fade along the top, less along the bottom here as well. I also took this one and spraying straight down along the top, applied just a little bit of a rust color, because tank cars like this over time will tend to rust a little bit along the top. And I applied some streaks. I think you can see it better on this side. Some streaks, as if a little bit of spillage had happened over time. Not a great deal, but just enough to create a little bit of streakage on that car. So those are a variety of products and methods that you can use to weather the items on your model railroad layouts and help create greater realism for yourself. Many of you, I'm sure, have tried some or several of these products. Hopefully you saw maybe something new today, either a new product that you haven't used or a new method for using that product, and I hope that you'll try that out. I know that weathering is a lot of fun for me, and I find it very gratifying as I do that and create those items that look more realistic for my layout. And I think you'll enjoy trying some of these new techniques as well, so I hope that you'll give them a try. Well, I hope that you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time here on Model Railroad Academy. You all take care.